Imagine yourself going to the farmer's market to buy a basket of apples. Do you take the first one you pick? Of course not. Most people spend some time. They look for apples that are good and firm and pretty, the kind their families can use. And, oops, this one's got a soft spot in it. Would you take this basket of apples? Of course not. Why would you spend good money on apples you can't even use? What if the basket of apples we buy turns out to have rotten ones on the bottom when we get them home? Well, you'd probably bring them right back to the farmer's market, wouldn't you? Now think about that. We demand only the best when it comes to the apples, the groceries we buy for our family, but when it comes to the schools that educate our children, we accept bad apples all the time.
What is a bad apple, and how many are in Georgia's education bag? It depends on who you're asking. Bad apples, say the state-funded Council for School Performance, are those schools in which half or more of the students cannot read or do math at their grade level. There were 156 of those bad apples in 1996 alone. 94 schools turned in the same rotten performances for 3 years running. More than half of those schools are in Metro Atlanta. Of the 1,023 Georgia schools that receive federal funds because they serve a lot of low-income children, more than half of those schools failed to meet agreed-on improvement goals for 2 years. Those are considered failing schools by the U.S. Department of Education. While most of our schools are not rotten, they're not grade A either. Consider this. In Georgia, 45% of our 4th graders and a third of our 8th graders cannot understand what they are reading. Only 1/4 of all 4th and 8th graders are considered proficient or advanced readers. This according to the National Assessment of Education Progress. Only 68% of Georgia's seniors pass all the sections of the Georgia High School graduation test on their first try. The state average SAT score is 49 points lower than the national average, and only half of Metro Atlanta's high schools score above that state average.
So what can we do? Well, there's a new variety of apple available in the education marketplace. It's called privatization. And tonight we're going to take a look at a special kind of privatization where a school board hires either a profit or a nonprofit company to manage some of those bad apple schools. We'll slice it up, see what it's all about. Is it really as good as it seems? Or are there maybe soft spots, dark spots, maybe even a worm underneath the surface? Does it taste any good? And above all, is it good for us in the long term? Stay tuned as we talk about privatization. We're going to show you lots of important things, but the core of our discussion, pun intended, is to make sure that what we do and the decisions we make are in the best interests of our children. Take a bite out of this.
Good morning, I'm Sally Sears, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Policy Forum, where community leaders, through the free and open exchange of ideas, are finding real solutions to the problems in our community. The Policy Forum is presented 3 times a year by Research Atlanta Incorporated, in partnership with Leadership Atlanta and the Atlanta History Center, Georgia Public Television, and the Regional Leadership Foundation. Today's program is sponsored by Bell South. We've got a lot of juicy issues to bite into, and we have a panel of distinguished guests to discuss them. So let's get started right away. Failing public schools. That is what we hear all the time, and the problem is not new. First, Congressman Johnny Isakson. You're a former president of the Georgia Board of Education, so you know exactly what it takes to create change. Why does it seem so difficult to reform our public schools?
Well, there's a reluctance to change, and it's a natural reluctance that a lot of people have. And my experience has been in this state that there has been some great exploration of changes for our schools. The Georgia Partnership for Excellent Education has done a great job in fostering change within certain parts of the school. I've seen a lot of the school systems. Our charter school effort has been a great effort at that, where schools actually get together, the parents get together, and they are going to make a change, whether it's discipline, whether it's grades, whether it's achievement, whatever it might be. But you know, it's a big population. The average school may have 600, it's a high school, it may have 1,500, 2,000. there are a number of parents, there are a number of teachers. One of the big problems we have in education today is I think we've lost the partnership between parent, teacher, and child in the universal sense. Charter schools, or privatization even, forces people to come together to see, is that not right for us? And with that, sometimes the change takes place, and because it brought people together, it works for the better.
We seem to be talking more about it rather than doing something, and it is in the doing in the charter schools that you think we're showing the best hope.
My experience, when everybody got together and actually committed to make the change, they began to focus on the result. And anytime you focus on the result, you end up doing better.
All right. Aaron Watson, an elected member of the Atlanta Board of Education, you answer to many parents. Why are so many of your schools having trouble and others are not?
Well, Sally, that's of course a very difficult question. Everybody will have an opinion about that. I want to be quick to remind us all that I'm speaking as only one board member, though I serve on the Atlanta Board of Education, and I'm not speaking for the entire board. You know, in the Atlanta public school system, we've got the very best schools in the state of Georgia, and we've got some of the worst schools in the state of Georgia. And that just exemplifies right there how complicated this task is. There are plenty of schools that don't need to be reformed, and there are plenty of schools that need to be reformed. And parents in each of those schools have an opinion about the form that any sort of reform would take. And so what we try to do in the Atlanta public school system is listen to our constituents. We listen to the parents first. We listen to our professionals in the school buildings. And we try to listen to the students. And right now we're looking at a lot of different options, as we always do, for reforming different schools throughout the system.
Neil Shorthouse, you helped to found, and now you're the president of Communities in Schools in Georgia. It's an example of how the private sector can be a good partner in education. In your case, you're providing comprehensive education and dropout prevention program for alternative schools in Atlanta and other public places. Do you think partnerships are a real solution for many of the troubled schools?
Well, there's no question that schools cannot make it by themselves, and no principal, no superintendent, no school board ever really thought that they could. Education is contingent upon the family doing its job, the community doing its job, people coming together and supporting our kids and our teachers and our schools. And so when the school decides to be a real true partner with the community, we think it has a better chance of reaching its kids. And when it decides that it can do it by itself, it then closes ranks and therefore excludes the very people who were originally designed as part of the mix to make it work. So the more we can be partners with the larger community, the more chance we're going to have to rally the kinds of resources to create a community development approach almost to improving learning by unifying the forces of the community, all of them together around kids, parents, teachers, and schools. That's what we think we need, and that when we do that, why we get a better result. Parents feel more connected, kids feel more supported, teachers feel like they're not alone, they're not the brunt of criticism because everybody's a part of it, everybody is feeling responsibility instead of everybody pointing fingers and saying, well, you're not doing your job or you're not doing your job. So in unification, in partnership, to us is a critical factor in improving our schools.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Robert Ingram, welcome to Atlanta. You're a member of the Miami-Dade County Board of Education. The Edison Project is operating a school in your district. Why did you turn to Edison?
Well, Edison came to us with an idea that they had an excellent project. And we decided at this time that we would partner with them to see exactly what the possibilities may be. Certainly the schools are looking for the right mix. We're looking for the best product for our children. A notion that safety is important, that scholarship is important, that support is important, and thereby bringing about success. Well, the Edison Project claimed that they would be able to produce this. They orchestrated their process so that it allows for longer school times and a longer school year. The jury is still out, however, as to its total effect.
Sam Engle, you and Ben Scafidi investigated this whole issue of contractor management. What does it mean for systems like Cobb and Atlanta and Bibb County here in Georgia, who just signed contracts with a company to manage some of their schools, and Atlanta's looking at it?
In our research, what we found was that what was attractive to schools was the idea that they could inject a measure of accountability in their system by contracting with a company to manage their schools. I think what they find so attractive is the idea that this company will allow them to be free of a lot of the regulations and the special considerations that a state has on a school, and they can bring in all kinds of new curriculum, new different kinds of management ideas that will allow them to reach the kids in a different way. A lot of these companies have specialized in creating curricula and creating management systems for helping children in disadvantaged areas, children in school systems that are largely very diverse, have a lot of minority children and have a lot of low-income children. So it seems that the systems are looking for a way that they can bring in a whole variety of reforms in one fell swoop, almost like a quick fix, it seems.
And you have found that this change in curriculum holds some of the magic that Edison promises to be able to deliver, and other contract managers. Changing curriculum is something as basic as that.
Yes, yeah, and what we looked at was not just Edison, and that's something that we have to remember, that there's more companies out there. There are cases where universities have partnered with school systems, where private nonprofits like Communities in Schools have come in and presented a new and an innovative way to teach the children in a way that some school systems are not able to do on their own.
Okay, thank you. Having a company manage your school, though, is not universally supported. And in your system, Dr. Ingram, in fact, we understand there's pressure on you to end the contract, not because Edison is doing a poor job, but because people just don't seem to like the concept. Why would people want to get rid of something that actually seems to be doing a good job?
The idea is that there are people who will be against anything.
Yes.
It matters not what it is, but the Edison project, we're into our third year, and we don't really know exactly what is going to happen there. But they have come in, and the one thing that I've noticed was the amount of support that the parents put with the school and the teachers. It seems a very, very different process, and I'm not clear on what that is at this moment. But what I have noticed is that parents really get behind the Edison project in a very real way.
Get behind it and support it.
And support it in a very, very real way. A little bit different than some of our other schools. And that's something that we have to take a look at. In terms of what the student has been able to achieve, well, we don't really know by comparison because we've not yet been able to discern that exactly. But I think Edison comes in with the idea that they have something new on the drawing board, and as a school, we're always trying to find something that is good for our students. And whatever works for our students for the uplift, and we're going to be about making an effort to try.
So why the effort to end it?
Well, those who are trying to end it are probably clearly not the ones that are in the school system. They're not the parents, because I've met with them on several occasions, and the concern is, and look, my concern is this, as it relates to the Edison project or any project that's coming in. The school system itself still has the responsibility and the accountability, but we don't have charge of the teachers that are being hired. There are claims that they will go with the contracts of our teachers' unions, and right now it seems that that's not necessarily the case. There are other things that are happening with the children. If anything occurs, we must move in and investigate or do whatever is necessary, and therefore it shifts from the school itself, the Edison project, back to the school system,
Yes.
where the accountability and the responsibility is still in our lap, and we don't have all of the controls.
Could you talk for a moment about the concern in the African American community that I hear over and over, that allowing somebody else in to run our schools will take away something important culturally to us? This is a complaint I've heard from educators in African American teaching schools primarily, and I understand it's widespread. What do you think? Have you heard that in Miami?
The belief is that so goes the school, goes your community. A popular commentary today is that it takes the village to raise a child. Well, when I was growing up, that was very, very true. There was a village that helped raise me. that included the schools, but then the teachers that were involved in my school system also attended my church. They also shopped in the same places that my mother did. So my education didn't start or stop at that school door. I think what people are concerned about is that when partners come in who have no relationship to the community, that they're only going to come in and provide those technical things that they perceive to be necessary. But that support, that village support that is necessary to compound and compact the educational process is eliminated.
Have you found that to be true?
Well, again, now we're looking at it. We've only had it for 3 years, so I can't say in a very direct sense, but for me personally, not speaking for the board, but for me personally, I have a concern.
Let's talk about accountability, though, a very important issue. Many people say that's the big problem here, a lack of accountability. How do we hold the contractor accountable? Sam, what do we do? You've looked at this. What's happened in situations other than Miami-Dade?
In research that we've done, there was that problem in many cases with companies that were not Edison. There was a concern about the measure of accountability. When something went wrong, it does fall back to the Board of Education to be responsible, which is one of those interesting ironies to me. One thing they talk about, certain people who are against contracting, they say, well, we're privatizing our schools. We're turning them over to somebody private. But in essence, it remains a public school, and it is still under the control of that Board of Education. So while you have that effort, we're not really taking that school away. It's still a public, very much a public school. There is that concern. What we found where schools did the best was when that contracting period, when you're writing your contract, is when you put in there and specify exactly who will be responsible for what. In the past, and I don't know the particular Miami case right now, but where schools got in trouble in the past was they wrote a very broad general contract that said you'll be responsible for these kinds of outcomes, but they didn't specify that if this happens, who's going to be held accountable. And in any kind of case, when you've got a contract, you would definitely want to do that. And if a company, at least in my mind, was reluctant to have those, to sign off on those kinds of measures, then a school system might seriously think again about contracting or not. But you've got to specify in there exactly what it is that you want and what you're hoping that company will provide for you and who's going to be responsible for what.
And in the end, of course, the accountability in the Atlanta Public Schools is with the Atlanta Board, and they've been accountable for some pretty dismal scores. Dr. Watson?
Again, we've been accountable for some great successes, and we've got plenty of challenges, and we try to meet them head on. And what that means in the context of this discussion is that we have to analyze and assess all opportunities, as Dr. Ingram alluded to, all opportunities that might end in some benefit for our youngsters in the city of Atlanta. And so board members come to a project like this, an opportunity like this, with an open mind, basically. Searching for information and hungry for great dialogue like perhaps we'll have this morning. But we have no interest, I want to make clear, in privatizing any of the public schools. All of the Atlanta public schools are public schools today and will remain public schools tomorrow and through the end at least of this board's term.
Let me ask you again, Aaron, to go back to the same issue of distrust in the African American community about a solution that includes somebody else coming in. This is very troubling. Some people say it's the end of a culture. They raise hyperbolic fears that it sounds as if Dr. Ingram has met face on. Do you feel that in Atlanta? Do you hear among African Americans in Georgia, this is not something we want?
Actually, we hear fears and concerns from African Americans and others in the city of Atlanta. There are plenty of people who have trouble with and certainly cautions about contracting out a public school. Plenty of people, and it's not just African Americans, it's not just teachers, and it's not just teachers of our teachers from certain of our colleges and universities. But it's a job of a board member who's elected to meet those kind of questions and concerns. It's our job to work through the concerns with the community and then make a decision. And in the city of Atlanta, we've made plenty of hard decisions on the Atlanta School Board in the last 6 years since I've been involved and in years before that. And we'll make these tough decisions the best we can in the interests of our kids and the community.
Mr. Shorthouse?
I think that Aaron hit the nail on the head. He said, what is best for our kids? And this has got to be the driving force behind any decision. Frankly, it seems to me that all of boards of education are in the privatization mode almost every day. I mean, they're contracting for textbooks, they're contracting to buy buses, they're contracting to buy computer systems, they're contracting to buy supplies. They daily privatize. They aren't responsible for the manufacturing of all those because they know they can't do them themselves. They go out and find somebody who can do it better. And somebody may provide a great textbook one year and they look at it 2 or 3 years later and say, you know, this really isn't what we want. Let's get a new one. So they end that contract and go buy another one. Business does it. Business is committed. There's a saying in business, if you don't take care of your customers, somebody else will. So business has got to be forced to provide the best product it can for the benefit of its customers. And I think Aaron's focused on the right thing. What is best for our kids? And if we have to go get somebody else to help us do that, whatever it is, I think it's actually the responsibility of the Board of Education to leave no stone unturned, as it were, to try to find what works best. And not everything works. In one situation will be suitable, as our governor says, one size doesn't fit all. So we've got to be willing to look at different things. But as long as we're driven by that one goal, and that is what is best for our kids, and can really hold ourselves accountable to that, then I think we're off the hook in terms of doing anything we want to do, as long as it's legal and as long as it's what's best for our kids.
Dr. Isakson. Mr. Congressman, while you were running Georgia schools, you had accountability as a watchword, and you also came up with some initiatives, including quality core curriculum and ITBS. What do you think when you hear that Edison's got a better curriculum in many schools than what the state requires?
Well, in answering that, I want to address something that Neil said and something that Aaron said. There's a terrible misconception here. Privatization is not taking public schools private. Privatization in education is outsourcing the management of service delivery. When someone today goes to Stone Mountain Park, they're going to a state park run by a private entity. When they go to a school that Communities in School has a contract with, they're going to a public school that has a private outsource of supply. So privatization is not taking schools private. Private schools are selective. They have tuition. They take the students that they want. They have a lot more control. Public schools takes all comers. In Georgia, they're 7 to 17. They come, we take them. And we get a bad break sometimes for the averages. The media, Sally, excuse me,
yes, indeed,
will take the average and say that's everything. Well, I want to tell Aaron and talk about accountability. This is an elementary school in Atlanta, and I was there 2 years ago. Things may have changed. Pitts Elementary. Atlanta was about to close it 5 years ago. They changed leadership in that principle, and that is a 100% free and reduced lunch school. 100%. They were right in the middle of Perry Homes. They were in a difficult situation. They changed leadership with the principal. Kids started wearing handmade uniforms. They got them from the Salvation Army and other things. Lockheed Martin donated some computers. That school turned around. Am I right, Aaron? That's correct. It moved forward. I'm not going to tell them about a couple of the others here. I don't want to tell them about that success story. But my point is, Lockheed Martin's private. The Salvation Army was outsourced to do those uniforms. What we've got to do is stop fearing change and looking at outsourcing for the resources that our public schools need. We always are blaming the wrong person. Now, the last point I want to make, in case I don't get to make it, I want to refer to something Dr. Ingram said. The public must understand that the child in kindergarten today is going to graduate from high school in 2012. Education is a process. It is not a Polaroid snapshot that you fix one day. We have got to, in this country, open up our opportunities, not be afraid of partial or total private contracting. The accountability still will always remain. And I felt like this on the state board with the Board of Education. I mean, you are constantly going to be trying to improve, and you constantly have to put measurable levels of accomplishment all the way down the chain.
If that's so, and Pitts changed as dramatically as we all know it did, why don't you find more of the administrators that turned Pitts around and get rid, Mr. Aaron, of the administrators that seem unable to turn around so many troubled schools in Atlanta?
Well, there are a lot of answers to that, but part of that is exactly what the public school system tries to do every day. That doesn't mean that you don't look at other opportunities as well. And that's why this discussion and the notion of partnering with different management organizations is just one of the possibilities for doing something good in a particular community. One of the possibilities, just one of many. The Atlanta Public School System still has 66 elementary schools. And if we happen to partner with somebody to manage one of them, we've got 65 remaining. Some of them, again, being the very best public schools in the state of Georgia, the very best.
Do you
and
think
some
it
of them
was-
being the very worst.
Yeah, so many being worst. I'm sorry to feel that we're beating up Atlanta, but so many seem to be on the list here. But Pitts is a good example because it turned around. Was it the partner, or was it the change in management and getting somebody who was really interested in change?
It's a combination, of course, as always.
Yes.
It's new management. It was a different group of teachers. You know, at the time we had a new superintendent in the Atlanta Public School System who helped to make all of that happen. It was different community partners who came to bear, including 100 Black Men of Atlanta and others who came in and mentored some of the kids. And then it was a different enthusiasm from the parents even in the community. It was a combination that made that change possible, and that change is occurring in other schools throughout the city of Atlanta, by the way. We have improvement in a number of schools. None of us believe it's fast enough and enough each year, and so we look at other possibilities of making that change happen even quicker for the benefit of our kids.
A good point about the rub-off effect. Dr. Ingram, can you tell me in Miami-Dade, has the effective Edison in one school had an appreciable benefit to the other schools that see this perhaps as competition and they need to clean up their act?
I don't think so. And let me back up. Edison is, again, just one of a multitude. We have something like 400,000 students nearly. We have almost 200 different nationalities with 90 different languages. Our school board is a very diverse school board, and we're struggling with a whole lot of things that other school systems probably don't have operable. And we think we're having some margins of success. The idea, again, is to help our children, and I think that is clearly our focus. And all that we do, the people that we involve ourselves with, are directed to making life better and to increasing the scores and narrowing the gap as it relates to our educational process. I think oftentimes, however, our teachers are getting a bad rap. I'm a product of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, segregated. I had some excellent teachers. Many of the teachers that I come in contact with today are still there. There's a lot of things that impact on their ability to deliver a service. I think there's a false belief, however, that privatization can remedy those things. I think privatization can help in some situations, not in all. I think the idea, however, of supporting that which is good comes into focus. We need to celebrate the teachers that we do have that are doing a great job. I think one of the things that goes on a bumper sticker that we see oftentimes in automobiles, if you can read this.
Thank a teacher.
So we need to begin to do that and stop, tearing them down and begin to support them. Sometimes when you talk about privatization, you talk about taking money out of a system that can help that teacher do a great job and putting it into another system and then still expecting the teacher to perform. And that's a problem.
Have you found that other schools can learn from Edison?
Well, again, we don't know that yet. Edison is coming in with a product. We're only 3 years into that. We're looking at what they're doing. If it is good, well, certainly we will learn from it, but we're not sure yet.
Okay. Sam, does it make sense in your studies that the effective Edison in one system, in one school, affects other schools within the same system?
In some cases, yes. In some of the research that we did in cases like Hartford, for example, who went through this process several years ago, they said one of the biggest benefits of it was that it helped the system learn new ways of providing education, and it helped give the other schools an incentive to do something different, to do something better. They terminated their contract for a number of reasons, most of which were financial issues. But in many of the cases that we looked at, they said it was a very good learning experience, that they were able to take some of the new ideas for educating and bring it into their school system. One of the most interesting things that we found in our research was that even if a school system goes through this effort of looking into contractor management and has brought in some companies and they've made proposals. They don't have to choose any of those people. They don't have to take any of them. They can take some of those ideas and say, hey, we never thought of that, but we can do this ourselves. We can take some of these ideas and we can bring it in and do it in a new and innovative way. But some school systems and some of the communities that when they hear about a school system like Atlanta think, well, Atlanta is going to do this. They're going to go with Edison. But Atlanta doesn't have to do that. They can take some of these ideas and come in with a whole new curriculum themselves. And I think, Neil, you experienced that with...
Well, I talked to Richard Benjamin last night and Gene Buinger. Richard Benjamin is the superintendent of Cobb County Schools, and Gene Buinger is the superintendent in Bibb County Schools, because I want to know the question that we were all asking, why can't you just do this yourself? And Richard Benjamin says, we can. But what we're going to do is we're going to take some money, a little bit more money. We think we're going to get more from it. We're going to add some more hours to the school day. We're going to add some more days to the school year. It's going to cost us about $600 more per kid. But we think it's worth it to find a new way, especially with a school that hasn't been doing that well. So we're going to, up close and personal, study the heck out of this over a number of years period and find out, is there something here that we can extrapolate back throughout the entire system? So he feels like the experiment is worth. He feels he's responsible to the people of Cobb County to provide the best possible product for his kids. So for that reason, he's willing to roll the dice on this. He feels like it's not a real gamble. He's researched it very carefully. He feels like Edison can do a good job for him.
Now let's make sure we all understand. This is a low-performing school in Cobb County.
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
close to the Governor Barnes's hometown. It's near Austell and Mableton, and it has very poor test scores and a high urban-type mix of diverse student body, right? They're going to extend the school day, extend the school year, and they have parental support.
Right. I mean, they have things that a lot of people have been asking for in public education, outside as well as inside. But he feels like they can do that very thing. The very thing that Edison is doing, he feels like he could do it. He said, in fact, we didn't even go after Edison. We began to look at 9 of our low-performing schools and begin to try to craft what we thought would be necessary for them to turn themselves around. And he felt Edison came along as a product that could do exactly what we were talking about. So we're not doing this with 9 of them. We're doing this with 1. And then as we go, he said, now I got these other 8 schools. They've got to begin to look at what they're doing and see if they can measure up to the changes that we're wondering and wanting from all of them.
Very good. Johnny Isakson, this sounds an awful lot like a charter school. How is it different if you do this way than a charter school, which you sponsored when you were president of the Georgia Board of Education?
Absolutely nothing. And I want to help the public here understand something. That elementary school, Clay, has the 3 ingredients that have to take place for change, just like what happened at Pitts. Number 1, they have a great leader. They have a principal who made commitments to improve that school. She has worked hard to bring the second thing together, which is the community, to say we want to, they are getting laptops for every 3rd grader. That's a part of this process. And 3, Cobb County has a Board of Education and a superintendent that is not afraid to try something and change and outsource. Those are the 3 ingredients to successful schools. I can take you to Green Acres in Cobb County, which is not privatized, but is outsourced within resources in the community, very diverse socioeconomic ethnicity, all of that. They've made great changes, and there's true all over the area, but the 3 ingredients to improve schools are a leader at the top, and I'm talking about the principal, who involves the community, that gets involved and supports the change, and a Board of Education that is not afraid to fail. I think we've got some mediocrity that exists because of the fear of failure. We ought to start looking for the rise of success by willing to take risk, and some of those risks means looking outside our own resources.
This does not sound like trickle down. This sounds like bubble up. Aaron Watson, is the Board of Schools in Atlanta receptive to an aggressive principal coming and saying this is what we've got to do? Would she or he get the backing of the City Board of Education?
Well, you know, the way that these changes do occur and will occur will come from the community. As Johnny said, I mean, every school board, every elected school board is going to be responsive to local communities. And so if parents in a particular community, you know, we have an example at Drew Elementary currently, If parents from that community, as they have, come to the school board and say, we want to try this new charter approach, which might, by the way, include a different management structure as well, then the school board is going to be very responsive to that and very attentive to that. And my answer to that is we will take it extremely seriously, and certainly we've exhibited in the past the courage to make those kind of decisions.
Yes, you have. Let's talk about profit for a second, because in so many cases that is really a dirty little word. What is the matter with somebody making a profit off our children if it's better than what's in place now?
It's happening every day. It happens in every school in America because McGraw-Hill, a profit-making company, is supplying textbooks and making a profit. Bluebird Bus, right here in Georgia, is selling buses all over America, and they are making a profit. And you could go right on down the list. We have food companies that are providing food services for our schools.
And they're competing for those contracts.
And they are competing for that, and they're making money, and they aren't plowing that back into the schools. They're plowing that back into the stockholders who invested in that company in the first place. That's the American way of doing things. That's American capitalism, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The issue is what Aaron said earlier. Is it best for the kids? If the food isn't any good, they got to get rid of that contract and get some good food in there, and they will do it.
Is there something in this that rankles us, that we're a democracy and our values are forged in the classrooms and in our communities, and we really shouldn't let that extra 500 that Cobb needs get in the way, but we also don't want somebody to profit unseemly from our children's misery?
Of course. We've looked to our public school system to do some important things over time, over our history. And those demands from the public school system have not always appeared to be consistent with a profit motive. And so we all get a little uncomfortable about, even though we recognize we have vendors in the schools and service providers and providers of goods who make a profit, we still are a little uncomfortable with the notion that the person responsible for our kids day to day will have a profit motive first, as opposed to a care of our kids motive. It's something that we're probably going to have to overcome, and that's our challenge right now. But we're uncomfortable with that concept. And that's the challenge for school boards and community leaders and folks on this panel and folks in the audience right now is to deal with and face that discomfort and decide if we still have an opportunity to do something great and better for our kids.
The idea, in my opinion, must be performance and not profit. If profit is the end product, then clearly we don't need that person. We need a person who's concerned about the students' performance and being sure that performance outweigh profit. And if they're coming in just to make money, and some of them will, and that's the caution the school board must take. And I like what Sam had to say about contracting beforehand. I think as we have developed this process, we're beginning to learn some things, especially as it relates to role identification, who reports to whom, and who's accountable to what, who's responsible for what. As we go into a new idea or a new contract term, clearly those issues will be made up front. We will be clear on who has the responsibility.
I have every faith that you will write a contract that will have a lot of fine print in it when you write it the next time.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good for the lawyers, isn't it?
Well, and with the idea with the contract, in some of the cases, and it's something that kind of makes intuitive sense that we found is a company should be able to make its profit only if it performs, only if it delivers what it says it will deliver. So you can very well put together a contract that says we will give you X number of dollars, just your base, but in order to make that extra money, say if you achieve these certain goals, then you get extra money for doing that.
And would some of that extra money go to the teachers, Sam? The teachers who've helped to make this happen? I'd love to hear from a teacher in the audience, by the way.
Well, Sally, in the Atlanta public school system, we've been the innovator in the nation in terms of incentive compensation for teachers and principals and everybody else in our schools. For those schools like some of the ones that have been mentioned earlier that have managed to turn themselves around, we've provided direct incentive compensation like in the private sector to reward them for their extra effort. And we're very proud of that. That's one of the innovations that we've employed internally in advance of outsourcing.
Aaron, how well are you doing at getting rid of the underperforming teachers?
Well, Congressman Isakson knows better than anybody how tough it can be sometimes under the state tenure law to get rid of underperforming school teachers. We struggle with that. We've done a very good job, I think, over the last several years at being a lot more aggressive about taking on non-performers. But we also have done a great job, we hope, about supporting our teachers better and giving them better training opportunities, which is probably even more, at least as important.
As weeding out those who aren't performing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Sal.
Yes, sir.
I have to inject two things. One is profit is not a bad word, and profit and performance go hand. Nobody in this room can name a company that delivers a lousy product and service for a long period of time that's still in business.
Right.
Okay, so the satisfaction of the Board of Education with the results of the performance. But as Dr. Ingram has said, in education, that is over an extended period of time to judge that product. Now, secondly, I'm really proud of the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia put in the area of administrators 5-6 years ago, gave local systems the ability to require a person being promoted to administration to waive tenure. Now, it's not true of teachers, but what it allowed is if someone was going to move from the classroom to administration to do so, they waived tenure, which meant there were no more guarantees other than results. Now, I don't know, I can't name systems that have and haven't, or I'm not going to get in here and make a mistake, but I will tell you this, some of the innovations that are taking place now in public schools in Georgia, many of which are not failing, are because systems have taken that process, people have taken the challenge of administration, and performance is the key to them moving forward. There no longer is that protection.
Yes, sir. Could you tell us who you are and who you represent?
My name is Dr. Robert Dixon, and I'm Associate Professor at Clark Atlanta University in the School of Education, Department of Educational Leadership. And I have listened very carefully to the positions of people on the platform, and I'm not for Edison Project or any means of privatization. A lot of research would indicate that, there's a lot out there that we got to find out about these people and whether or not these organizations and whether or not they are able to really deal with the children who come to the schools that they're going to take over. Most of these schools are schools that house children from very challenging communities, and they bring a lot of problems to school that the teachers really need some help with. And I think that, and I want you to understand that I'm not speaking from theory. I was a former principal in the Atlanta school system. I taught Neil's daughter, attended my school at King Middle School. I spent 39 years in the Atlanta school system as a teacher and as an educational leader. And I chose to work in very poor communities because I felt that these were the schools that really needed good leadership, and I could provide that.
Let me ask you, sir, if in these situations, when they do come in and improve things, is it not better than the status quo, leaving it as it is with so many schools?
I'm not so sure that they are improving things, is what I'm saying. First thing. And then the second thing is that we have models of good schools in our urban communities. We ought to find out what's going on in those schools, and we ought to try to replicate them in other situations. We don't need Edison Project to do that. All we need is some backbone to put some money, some resources, and some good teachers and principals in those situations, and it would do. It will educate our kids, and that's what we're talking about: educating our kids.
Very good. Do you think that a stronger principal and weaker tenure laws would be part of the answer?
There's no question about it that good leadership always, brings about good results in schools. I'm an example of that, so I have to speak for that, and it's my job at the university to try to train, or shall we say, develop the kind of leaders that our schools need in order to move them forward, to move them from dysfunctional positions into very, very functional positions. And just to say that a school is achieving at, 50% of the kids achieving at the national norm, that school is 50% dysfunctional. And we ought not to be satisfied with just 50%. We got to keep moving and moving and moving until 100% of the kids are achieving in the school, and that's what we ought to work for.
Could you identify
Yes.
yourself, sir?
My name is Bill Clements, and I'm from Cobb County, and I'm a public school advocate. And I guess to one of the questions that you raised, Sally, regarding privatization of schools, and Mr. Shorthouse explained privatization of busing, food services, and the likes. But there's quite a difference between busing and stand-up classroom instruction and the privatization of such. And my point is, a private for-profit company is trying to make a profit. If you pay them $5,000, which is a number that's bannered about, and they're making 10% profit eventually, that's $500 per child. That's a lot of money. If you give any principal $500 of discretionary money to spend per child, 500 additional discretionary dollars, they can make some things happen. I'm married to one of them, and I know she gets about $30 per child. So let's start talking. If you're going to put money into it, let's give it to the people who are there in the classroom and see if they can make a difference first before you get into privatization. And when you talk about curriculum that another group might bring in, Success for All is the curriculum we're talking about. And any teacher here knows full well you got to have a heck of a lot of resource to do Success for All. That's one-on-one, small group, one student, one teacher. I've been to the private school sector. I wrote those checks. It was one-on-one. You can't afford that. The taxpayers, that's $12,000, $15,000 a year per student. So we have to look at this thing before we jump into privatization.
What is your main objection if the dollars then follow, as they appear to be doing in Cobb County?
Because it's a disproportionate larger amount of dollars. Number one, any child in Atlanta or in Georgia can profit by 30 additional days of school. Any school can profit by more technology. Any school can profit by more professional development. Any school can profit by longer school days. I mean, that's no secret. Any teacher in this crowd can do a better job if she's got the young student 30 more days per year. But can we afford it as taxpayers? When you're using taxpayers' money, fundamentally, you have to just spread it out in an equitable manner. You can't give this school more than that school. That's the essence of taxation and what privatization and what we taxpayers are paying for.
My name is Bob Cribbs, and I'm with the Georgia Association of Educators, National Education Association. And my question is for the member of the Atlanta Board of Education. One of the things that struck me in reading the synopsis of the Cobb County experiment with the Edison project and moving into the Edison project was the months and months and months of negotiation that they spent with the Edison folks in coming to that contractual agreement. My question is this: how much time are school board members spending with the faculties and the community of the school in looking at the ingredient that Congressman Isakson said was so crucial, and that is bringing the community together? Why are they simply willing to abandon that school and not spend the time with the faculty and the community of that school to understand how they perceive those ideas for improvement to be, and look to some outside corporation rather than inside their school system? And the last point is that abandoning tenure is not the, I think, solution, but improving the evaluation system and establishing those measurable standards in each school. Has the Atlanta Board of Education done that, and are they willing to do that?
You seem to be drawing most of the fire this morning, Mr. Watson.
No, that's not a problem. I think this gentleman has missed most of the essence of the conversation so far this morning. As I said, I'm sure numerous times, the school system in the city of Atlanta works with all of our communities trying to figure out what we can do best for our kids. Sometimes we're extremely successful, sometimes we're less successful. I, as a board member, don't spend any time negotiating with any organization to come in and take over a school or manage a school system. That's not the responsibility of a school board member. But our staff are working diligently with families and other representatives of the communities, because there are many other people who have a role to play, as we've said all morning, trying to figure out great reform opportunities and great support opportunities for schools and communities that are doing good things and making modest improvements just under the current format. So I hope that's responsive to your comment.
I'm Jackie Black, and I'm with Hands on Atlanta AmeriCorps with Inman Middle School as a literacy coordinator. My statement and question this morning for your panel is that teachers seem to be even more encumbered nowadays with so much to do, so much more than just instruction. For example, the paperwork that must be generated to meet board standards and to keep records in progress on children, even down to the coordination of certain duties such as field trips or special events. And my question to you is, when privatizers or privatization comes in, would they be willing to take on assistance support or take on that burden that's been left on instructors to do so much more in the day besides teaching, so that the instructor can return to teaching? Or is this going to be more of the same of pursuing contracts in order to get the money, to get the bottom line, so to speak?
I think Johnny Isakson is eager to leap in on this one.
Yes, ma'am. That's a wonderful question because it allows me to answer it and then say something that Neil prompted in my mind. The essence of charter schools or private contracting is a series of waivers of state rules or local board rules. In other words, you have master rules that govern state education, and then local boards have education. When you get into a charter school or a private contract, the board then waives certain things. It may waive certain paperwork. It may waive this or it may waive that. So it's breaking the mold, whether it's a public charter or whether it's some type of privatized contract. But I want to, and following up on Neil's question, I want to say something that the listeners or viewers hopefully will follow. Too often, the person gets the least credit and the most blame is the teacher. Now, notwithstanding what anybody will tell you, too many Americans are expecting teachers to raise their children and educate their children. The biggest problem we've got in the United States of America that's a disability is parental deficit disorder. It is a disorder where there are too many parents who are not engaged with their children. We've got to re-engage that. So when you talk about those teachers, we need to understand that the teachers get far too much blame, far too little credit, and have placed upon their shoulders today far more responsibility than the teachers. I remember when I went to school, or I'm sure Dr. Ingram remembers when he went to school. So it's very important to understand that the concept of privatization or the concept of charters is a series of waivers where the local board or the state board or both, in the case of charters, waive certain rules which may be paperwork, may be certain tests, may be hours of attendance in terms of lengthening them rather than shortening them, may be length of tenure in terms of lengthening it rather than shortening it. And that's what it's all about. It's about creativity. But it does not, I don't know of a privatization situation in the country or a contract that has eliminated, abused, or done away with any teachers. In fact, most that I'm familiar with, and I'm familiar with mostly this part of the country, the teachers are still there. It's a different type of leadership. It's a different type of rules, a different type of goals, but the teachers are still there and their rights and tenure still exist.
You've got to get that broad-based community support, as Representative Isakson said. You've got to get your parents, your administrators, your teachers. And I just wanted to say, you asked me before, would the issue of going to privatization spark any kind of improvement in the rest of the school system? And what we've heard over and over this morning, even from people who support it and who are very wary of it and are opposed to it, they say, we should be able to do this ourselves. Sure, we should, but we haven't. And so what I would like to challenge everybody today is say, if these are things that are working, if we need to give our teachers more support, if we need to give them incentive-based performance raises, if we need to give our parents better education so they can support their children, why don't we do it? And why don't we start today with everybody who watches this program and everybody who's sitting here, make the commitment to go back and do something, to say we're not going to accept the status quo, we're going to do something different.
Jacqueline Crawford, and I'm president of South Cobb Council of PTAs in Cobb County, and I'm also a parent of a second and third grader at Clay Elementary School. We talk about privatization and someone making profit. Our children need help at Clay Elementary School. The Edison Project can give us the resources that we need, and it has been a two-year struggle for us to reach to the Edison Project. We just got approval last Tuesday. But this is something that the parents want. And for the first time, the parents at Clay Elementary has gotten together and said, we want something better for our children, and we demand it. And our board has been very very gracious with us and been very, very particular with the lawyers and have taken their time to make sure that our children are going to get what they need. And we debate and debate and debate about children and education. We don't put enough money in education because if we did, we wouldn't have to build so many prisons that we do all the time. We need to put our focus on our children and our education. Teachers that teach at-risk children, they work very hard, and they do get a lot of blame. But they work very, very hard because they have to deal with children that come from homes where there is no assistance, where there is no computers. Edison will give the computers to the homes so that when the children come home, the parents can help them. Edison will also educate our parents. It's something, you know, you were talking about parental deficit, but it's also our parents need help. And that's one thing that Edison is going to do. It's going to give us the resources that we need. And for all the people that are against Edison, I mean, that's their opinion. But we need help, and Edison is going to give us the resources that we need. Right now, currently, we have 24% Hispanic population, no bilingual teachers. And then we look at our test scores, and we wonder what's going on. So Edison is going to give us the help that we need, and I applaud them for what they're trying to do with us.
Thank you. What a wonderful way to end with a positive story about a school that's changing and some thoughts that all of us can take home and begin with. We appreciate your joining us for this debate on privatization of public schools and what could we do about it? Are we saving our schools or selling our children?